Good evening and welcome to the Watchmen's Report. I'm Cody Higley, and tonight we're joined by Jason Foreman and Robert Landon. And this is a pop up broadcast, kind of a feature that we call On the Money. So we've got some good information for you tonight, focusing on the history of kind of the dysfunction when it comes to the finances in the city of Marion and some of the other topics that are related, like the IT breaches, all that good stuff that Marion Watch has been posting on here for some time. So we're going to give a little update on that, some discussion, and there's nobody better to have that discussion with than Jason Foreman, who has been publishing quite a bit on it. So, Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the latest developments on that front?
Yeah, so when we first started this, and I believe we started investigating it in 17, 18, we had a lot of theories, and one of the biggest theories was that there was a reconciliation problem. It shows in, audits through the years after the software was installed, and also software controls were another theory that we had that was confirmed. As of 24, we don't know why it was down and not functional from basically the install until Veritas confirmed it in 24, and then the Collins administration has worked to fix it in 25. But in IT, especially in this level, what you have is, I guess, predictable paths. So when you see dysfunction like this, you can almost guarantee it goes back. So that was another theory, and that's what this is all about here. It's pretty significant, and I know you guys have seen this, but it's a pretty long article, but we'll try to kind of go down through this. We've already gone through the recent issues with the compromised core systems and the lack of basic security and all of that stuff. What we're after is the historical findings that we have come across, and they are just wow. And I know you guys agree with that.
Just so folks know, what page are you referencing?
I'm on MarionWatch.com. That's our main page.
In this particular article that you posted, all these citations are coming from where? We're not pulling them out of our asses, are we?
Oh, no, they're not theory. They're coming directly from either councilmen. In this article, it's mostly state audits. So we sent our, we call her our investigative researcher. Tina went down to Columbus and pulled all this stuff off of microfilm, and it was interesting what we found. And what we found here is just a onslaught of failure, I guess, is the best way to put it. And it repeats through the 80s, through the 90s, into the 2000s, and then it just kind of explodes with this software installation. And as any IT expert would tell you, or any competent IT guy, the switch in software is always a tumultuous time. It can add in a lot of factors for, malicious actors and things of that nature. But this is just very fascinating as you go down through this stuff that was found in these earlier audits. This is in the 80s. And one thing that keeps on repeating is utility billing and sanitation. And it's just an avalanche of crazy. A lot of repeat issues, expenditures. We see this now, expenditures exceeding appropriations, or, illegal funds being dispersed without council's permission. It's the same story. It's just never really stopped. And as you go into the mid 80s, failure to correct known problems, repeat finding, lack of inventory, tax levy certifications, all kinds of crazy stuff. And all of it ties in with IT issues as you get, into the computer age, into the 80s and 90s. We haven't got back into the 70s yet. But this is pretty telling. And these are predictable issues. So in IT, when you have lack of technology controls, the symptom of that in a municipality or any money handling organization, an enterprise, a company, a government, is usually you're going to find IT problems. And boy, we found them. Lack of daily deposits, bypassing competitive bidding, all kinds of crazy stuff, IT problems, no passwords on the main computers, lack of segregation of duties, which means that basically anybody in certain departments could do whatever they wanted. Cash disbursements, there's no reconciliation, and this is just a pattern that goes through the 80s and 90s, quite concerning. The IT issues just keep on getting worse. There's a couple of years where they don't find any, but as you know, with the financial stuff, and we've talked about, these are kind of spot check audits, as I understand it financially, and that would be the same way, kind of a general controls or a spot check IT audit. So if there's anything that's not blatantly obvious, I would think that they wouldn't look too much closer, like in this one. This one doesn't have any listed that we could find. And then 1997, you've still got all these legal issues. And some of these are in the millions of dollars deficit. There's sanitation again. We're getting into the Y2K craziness. And it just keeps missing backups. No disaster recovery plan. And then as you get later in the 90s, it just keeps on going and going. So this is a predictable outcome that you're seeing with the New World System, especially since it was admitted, flawed, installed by the government in 2021 council minutes, and that's in another article. But the conclusion in this article is basically sums it all up. These are financial and IT control failures at the highest level. Like when an IT person looks at this stuff, I'm not even a finance guy. I mean, I can put it together and use my sources, you guys and other people, to kind of piece it together. But from an IT perspective, this is high order failure. Like all these crazy problems that we've seen with the $1.28 million tax error, it wasn't how did it happen, is when was it going to happen? If that makes any kind of sense.
Well, it sounds like there was a dysfunctional culture in the city of Marion going back decades. We're not even talking about originating in July of 2009 with the city's expenditure of nearly $1 million to purchase the New World software. That obviously didn't pan out very well either. And there's been a lot of questions and potential manipulation, it sounds like, since that installation date. But it sounds like the culture within Marion's government was dysfunctional going back at least to the 1980s. Now, whether or not that was deliberate or was just this is how we've been doing things for years, so we're going to continue to do it this way, regardless of what the proper protocols and procedures should be. Because the other thing you got to remember is that a lot of these government elected positions were part-time. The mayor was part-time until I think 1964 or something like that. The auditor, the treasurer still is part-time position. Solicitor, they used to call the law director position the solicitor. The solicitor was another part-time position.
Well,
The
let's be real.
was so much smaller not that long ago. And
Russell is still part-time, right?
Well, that's what we hear. He just hires out all the work. But so if you've got somebody who is working a full-time job and they're serving as a part-time mayor or a part-time solicitor or a part-time auditor, and then they have to transition into full-time, you're probably still going to have like kind of a messed up system in government moving forward.
Right.
What do you think about that, Robert? I mean, you were in office. Do you think that that would cause maybe as from a cultural standpoint some of these deficits that kind of carried on?
Yeah, I think it's a lack of just really in leadership and management, we always had this saying, you inspect what you expect. Meaning if I have an employee and I tell them to do something, I might not have to micromanage them, but I should certainly be inspecting what they're doing. And you work in the banking industry, and I've worked in the banking industry, and you and I both know segregation of duties is a huge thing there because you're dealing with a lot of money. And people lose their jobs over that. You lose your job for walking away from your computer without even locking the screen because somebody can get in there. You definitely don't share passwords. That's an immediate termination. And some of this stuff, depending on the level, they will even sue you or take you to court over, pursue damages. Banks are not above those types of things. So, why we are thinking things should be different here at the city of Marion when we have password sharing and we have a lack of segregation of duties that is documented by the state auditor's office. This is not something we are saying. These are state government reports. Going back, like Jason said, to the 80s, it's very concerning, and it seems like it's a cultural issue. It seems like we're kind of lackadaisical of sorts within our government on how we handle those things. And so it's very concerning, and I'm glad we're bringing it up tonight. Jason has so much great insight with this because of his years of experience in IT. And I think the three of us coming together, bringing our financial backgrounds and IT backgrounds, it's really a combination of those backgrounds. The New World software not being installed right just compounded this issue even more. But obviously it's not just New World, like Jay said, it goes back to the 80s.
Do you think, Robert, I mean, having experience with the New World software in that system, do you think that it was deliberately set up kind of in a deficient way, or do you think that it was negligently set up that way or recklessly set up that way?
That's a really great question. I think that is really what gets to the heart of it, Cody, honestly. And it's hard to say because we can kind of speculate based off of what we know and not being there. But it does beg the question, what was this a deliberate thing? Why would we set it up wrong, knowing what the state auditors expect? And I think, at minimum, let's give them the benefit of the doubt just for the scenario here. Let's say that they did not and they were negligent. Well, this kind of really puts a hole in their argument about how they said I didn't hire qualified people. Well, I think we should stack those up. Let's stack up my employees versus their employees. First of all, the only people we got rid of were the appointees. So your tax investigator that was there for, I think she was there for 20 years. John, he was an account clerk. He'd been there for years and came from utility billing, and that's a whole nother situation. So we had people that were there for years. The payroll specialist who went on bereavement leave when the IRS mistake happened, she was there for 10 years. I didn't fire her. She ended up actually getting promoted out to transit. It really begs the question, why would we install it wrong when you know how it's supposed to be set up on a cash basis? It should have been corrected early on, and then it wasn't. The audits for the previous administration, Kelly Carr, Kathy Chafin, those at the helm during those years, just absolutely terrible for the first 5 years. And then, going back to, her 12th year in office, having IRS penalties. It's just, she wasn't really experienced as much as they want to say. I think
she won an award, Robert. She won an award, remember?
Well, I won the same award my first year in office. So, does that really
I hear that all the time. On that
let's actually settle that. You know what that award is for? That award is not really that your audit is to tell you if you're doing good or not. The award is saying, hey, you put together a good report You got it. You got an A+ on this report you did. You did an excellent essay, so to speak. And that's all done by the state auditor's office. You just give them the information and they put it together in the format that the GFOA, I think, Government Finance Officers Association, that gives out the award. And they say, hey, you did a great job. Here's an award for putting together the report that meets our standards. And so many people get that. So, yeah, that's just nonsense. I got somebody in the city nominated me for the GFOA Hero Award, I think it was, during COVID. It's not a huge thing, but I thought it was kind of hilarious. So that was during COVID. But these are just things that was not fixed by this administration. They let it go on, and they really didn't hire the right people. Again, I wanted to go back though, Cody and Jay. I think Kelly Carr worked for this Marion City School District, and I think she was just a secretary there. And I don't mean that derogatively, but in the context of being a city auditor, they want to talk about qualifications. I would think being a bank manager and a business manager for years, and then, being on city council before I ran for auditor would give me more experience than just going from, secretary at a school to running the city's finances. I mean, what do you guys think about that? And am I wrong? I can't remember her background. I'm a little fuzzy, right? It's been a long day. But isn't that what her
Not only
background
that,
was?
though, I've heard it repeated in discussions lately that you were the one and only, really, to set the precedent of cleaning house when it comes to like your deputy auditors and your internal auditor. And that, I found out, is not true. She actually did the exact same thing when she was brought on. And then Schertzer kind of did that. Schertzer removed the supervisor of utility billing, interestingly enough, and replaced it with one of his Democrat appointees, Brenda Dyer Nwaso. Is it Nwaso? Is that how she?
Nwaso, something like that. Yeah.
Nwaso, Sue, so whatever. And then coincidentally, she ended up getting charged and pleading guilty to theft in office in the amount of $34,000. There's a lot of interesting developments. So you have this incoming class of Democrats come in January 2008. They hold, what was it? A supermajority in council. There were 7 entering council that year, taking seats. A lot of them had been in office for years before that, but so the supermajority in council. You also had a straight ticketed Democrats as far as Mayor Scott Schertzer. You had Auditor Kelly Carr. That was her first year in office, was January 2008. You had Tom Panet as treasurer, and you had Mark Russell, once again, Democrat, as the law director. And Russell, of course, has been in office since Eber Baker founded the city of Marion. So pretty interesting. So then a lot of your holdovers from the Kellogg administration, and remember Jack Kellogg, the Republican, had been mayor for the preceding 16 years. So you have a lot of people who are replaced. And then within a year of that, you have the utility billing supervisor, who again was hired under the Jack Kellogg administration, gets replaced. Then Brenda Dyer Nwaso gets caught stealing money from utility billing, $34,000, pleads guilty to it. It's just interesting. It's an interesting coincidence that it's utility billing. And as Jason said, that's something that showed up for many, many years, right, Jason? Am I wrong?
Yeah, it goes back into the early 80s. I just went past one, actually a couple, sewer and sanitation, Um, utility billing, sewer sanitation seemed to be a repeat issue. I'd say way more than others. Access control problems, IT problems, and of course, it spiraled into our first initial clue a long time ago. Right after I first met Mr. Landon, was that this theft went unnoticed for like 3.5 years. That was our first tip off that the financial controls were out of whack. Of course, we couldn't prove it. We didn't have access to the system. And even if I would have brought it up when we were impressed last time, 6 years ago or so, everybody would have just attacked us because it hadn't been proven by, qualified individuals, although we have more than qualified individuals on the team. So I have a lot of questions here as far as, all these breaches of law, and these controls are mandated by law. All these workarounds that were going on for 15 years or whatever it was. This is a highly dysfunctional and unacceptable financial and IT environment. This should never happen. Maybe for a little while after this, as you're getting the kinks ironed out of the system, but under no circumstances should be flying by workarounds and no controls. I mean, they're there for a reason. So I want to know if they found this in 21 and admitted to it in council minutes. Obviously, there's people that are in or were in the government at that time that would know that this is a breach of financial control, state and federal law. And Cody, you're the legal guy here. Why didn't they do something about this?
I mean, all I can imagine. Are you talking about the auditor of state not doing anything?
I'm talking about the local government. Like, it's obvious. It's in the 21 council minutes that they said that the system was not installed properly. So they obviously knew that these software controls were off, disabled, not installed, not configured properly. I would assume that legal experts in the city of Marion would know about this. I would definitely assume that the IT people would know about this, and they should know. That's not good. Like, if I was in the private sector working as an IT guy, which I have been, and the vice president of the company found out that I was, running credit card systems or something without the financial controls on or the exact link specifications, the number of digits and specification of digits and the form of them, like you would have on like eBay or Amazon. You put your credit card in wrong, it won't work. Why didn't somebody do something about it immediately?
Well, again, I think that it begs the question as to what the real motivations were. Again, why would you expend? You're talking about layoff. Conversation was pervasive heading into that January 2008 formation of government. It continued throughout 2008 that we got to do these cutbacks and we got to do layoffs and going to have to really tighten the belt in order to try to get through these hard times during the Great Recession. And in the midst of that, you say, hey, what'll make things better is spending nearly $1 million on some new financial software for the city. I that's
Right.
that's just odd. Like, and to say that the reason is it's going to increase efficiency and functionality within government departments and bill paying and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, if you're talking about really tighten the belt and laying off human beings, people, employees of the city, how many salaries can you fit into $1 million?
A lot.
Quite a few.
Especially
So,
back then.
especially back then. So there had to have been a hell of a lot of desire for something like this. And then you start putting it in, what is the department within, well, really the city that has the most transactions. Robert, can you answer that?
What department has the most transactions? Is that what your question was?
Like on a retail basis.
Yeah, utility billing by far.
Utility billing. So in 2008, I think I read that it was like $4.5 to $5 million
Sounds
in
about right.
transactions. So that's a substantial amount of money. It's a substantial amount of money that's coming in from a large number of sources. So people with accounts with the city of Marion. So if you were to pick a particular part of the city of Marion to manipulate and have the best chance of getting away with manipulation, which department's going to be? Going to be utility billing. And kind of also raises the question, or I guess you could set up a analogy. If you're working for a company and you think that there's no way, just like say you work for a bank, okay, and you have access to the vault, and inside the vault there's $500,000. So if you said, man, look at that money. If I take this money, I'm going to be locked away in prison for at least the next 20 years. So you say, and I undoubtedly will get caught. I ain't going to touch it. Now, if you walk into that vault and said, man, with the way things are set up, I can get this money, baby, and they ain't going to catch me. So that, if nothing else, the fact that Brenda Dyer Nawazo had a mindset that she thought that she could get away with stealing $34,000 of the taxpayers of the city of Marion, their money. That says a lot to me, because most people are not going to potentially throw away their lives for $34,000. At least if you were in the bank vault and you got $500,000, a little bit different.
Go to Mexico.
Right. But 34,000, you ain't retiring in Mexico either. So
right.
It is more indication of dysfunction. And if we're talking about that being within the confines of this new world system, then how much else, money disappeared or was moved here or there or whatever. Well, and if you look at the audits and what Jason has compiled there, it looks like there was quite a bit.
It's pretty bad. So yeah, we have all kinds of, the IT things are red flags, wrapped up with the financial stuff, but we have confirmed that there were inappropriate permissions. I'm not going to speak as to exactly who I know had. I already spoke about one person we have the screenshots of. I have not released yet. I have shown them to multiple council people. You guys have seen them. They're authentic. From 2021, massively inappropriate, massively unethical, just a complete train wreck. And we know of other people that were in positions that had no business need to have permissions to this new world system whatsoever, other than maybe read permissions. But from the descriptions that we're getting and the people that were pulling, data or entering data, these were higher level permissions. They could pull reports, make transactions, in almost any department. And that's highly concerning to anybody in IT, and I'm sure finance too. If anybody can log in and get permissions, there's no ticketing system that I've been able to ascertain from anybody. So basically what we're getting here is you have permissions being managed by non-IT staff on word of mouth, maybe an email if they feel like it. I'm going to tell you something. In the real world, you don't get a mouse changed without a trouble ticket.
Ooh, that's a good point, Jay. If I may interject real quick, because now that you mentioned that, this is actually something I never really brought up previously, but you're right. I don't recall anytime I would ask Jacob or anybody in my office would ask our IT person at the time was Jacob. I think he's still there. Hey, can you help with this? Can you do this or whatever? You never got a ticket, a help desk ticket like you would at a corporation or, really anywhere. It was like we were running like a mom and pop shop, out of a garage. And it's just like, hey, man, hey, old buddy, go take care of this thing. And he's like, sure, I'll go do that. Like you didn't get any kind of documentation. And if we want to be up to snuff, so to speak, and above board, where's the documentation? Why don't I get a ticket put in and then when it's fixed or finished, you close out the ticket? Like there should be a paper trail for all of those things. Why was that not a standard practice there, Jay?
And not only for that kind of stuff, but if there's a problem. So just for the permission issues. Okay. So to cover your ass, the ticket says, okay, I've got authorization from, I don't know who runs the show. I still haven't been able to figure that out in the auditor's office, but say that you submit a ticket as the auditor or deputy auditor to give whoever permissions to this module or whatever permission you're asking for. And you say that you have authorization from the auditor and the mayor. Okay, cool. So they give them that permission and then they go in there and they do something completely inappropriate and nobody can figure out why, because there's no ticket and there's no control. That's the whole problem here. It's a control problem. The security controls are out of control. And you can use tickets also to research more in-depth problems, anything from network issues. If you make a change in a network, it's documented. So, I can't remember everything. I know in an IT environment, there's thousands of things that you'd have to remember over a period of time. And you might not remember that you made that switch, to that Cisco or to the server or whatever, the port. You issued a computer to somebody. Oh, I forgot about that. But here it is in the ticket system. You can work your way back and put together the piece. You know what I mean? So what we have here is no control, no documentation, and basically a culture of everybody doing whatever they want and no accountability because there's no trail.
So, Robert, can I ask you a question about how did it operate when you were auditor? So let's just kind of paint the picture, at least how it was at that time. And I assume probably was that way before you and after you. So let's say that I am the supervisor of the parks department and I had to go paint one of the buildings. So I go and purchase the paint, the rollers, all the materials needed for that project. Do I then submit a request for payment of that invoice to you at the auditor's office? How does that work? And then does the auditor then sign off on it and submit it to the treasurer for actual payment? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you can't spend any money, first of all, until you, one, have a budget allocation, obviously. It has to be appropriated by city council. So if you need $10,000 in supplies for the year, you better have $10,000 in your supplies line item for the year as your budget. And then if you want to go and spend, let's say, I don't know, $1,000 on a couple new desks, well, you better have a purchase order. That purchase order is what they would say in accounting, they encumber that money, or it really sets aside that money as already allocated for a specific purpose. That's your documentation trail. You cannot in government finance spend any kind of money without a purchase order. So you have that purchase order in place, and then you can go and spend your money, whether on your city credit card or you issue a check. And then you better have a receipt or an invoice for that as well. So then you can process your journal entry that transaction had occurred, because you have to do a journal entry and you have to do double entry journal entry. So, and I'm going to get mixed up here, but you debit one line item and you credit your other line item. It's called double entry accounting. And that's why you also have your trial balance report that we've talked about in the past. That was like $104 million out of whack because it was never used right since the New World software was installed. And I actually had Alex Reese write a letter to the city of Marion because I was talking to him about it. He's like, no, he's like, this is, he had done tax accounting for years, helped businesses. He's like, no, you have to have a trial balance report because this is how you double check your work to make sure your journal entries are right. Because it should automatically detect that if you had some sort of error on your journal ledger, that your trial balance would help catch that so you could go back and correct it. But if you're not using it, and if you're not using your bank reconciliation module, well, then you're just doing everything in Excel. And you're doing all these workarounds that the former auditor talked about all the time. So, again, the process, and this is laid out by state auditor regulation. This is the way government accounting works. You have to have the purchase order. Then you can go and spend the money. And then you got to have your invoice and receipts documented. And then you can process your journal entries to say that, okay, this is what happened. So that's how that process works.
Are they getting like a department? So in my example, would that supervisor from the parks department, let's say it was all within allocated funds, whatever. Are they going and using like a credit card? Are they just going to the retailer and saying, hey, send us an invoice and we'll submit payment to you? If so, like, are they then submitting that invoice to the auditor who then approves it and it goes to the treasurer for a check to be cut?
In a sense. So the treasurer really never actually cuts checks. So the treasurer's name's on it. It's all really done by the treasurer, because at one point things used to be separate. And then I don't know where, this is decades ago, where everything was just brought up under the auditor's office. Where the auditor was the one that did all of that. So at the time, like Tom Panet, for instance, was the city treasurer. His name would be on checks. But to your example there, so if the park superintendent goes out and wants to buy money or spend money and buy something, they have to have that purchase order in place. Now, there's a variety of methods they could have actually physically paid for it. They could have checked out a city credit card. There's a folder that we would allow people to check that out. And then, we could issue a check, or if it was like a place like Office Depot, I think we had an account with them where they would just bill us, and then we would cut them a check. So it would be, one of those three scenarios typically is what you would see.
So when the current Marion City Auditor, Miranda McGinnis, I think at 2 council meetings ago, and she was talking about how they changed the permissions, the general ledger authority in the New World system. How do you understand what she said? Like, can you elaborate on that, having that background and experience in that position? Because when you transcribe what she actually stated, it sounds like a number of city employees outside of the auditor's office were empowered in the system to override expenditures. Is that, like, can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, and just to kind of back you on what you were saying there, that's the way I interpreted it, is that that's how she was saying, is that she went in there and was removing all this override authority from other employees. So yeah, like for instance, if you have your clerk out there at the fire department submitting purchase orders and they want to buy some new, I don't know, gas masks or air tanks. Well, like I said, you have to have a purchase order submitted. And if they don't have the money in the line item, then they can't even submit the purchase order. because they don't have budgetary authority to do that, because it's supposed to be a check in place that keeps them from being able to even submit purchase orders if there's no money in that line item. Or if you had money in there and you exceeded the line item authority, it's supposed to cut it off. But what Miranda was saying is that these people, and she didn't, I don't think she gave specific examples to my knowledge, but just for hypothetical purposes, let's say it's the clerk at the fire department. If she or he was in there and they submitted this air tank, they could override it, for instance, because they have override authority, even though they didn't have the money in their line item. And so that's what she's referring to. These people had ability to override budget restrictions. So they didn't have enough money, so they still submitted it anyways, or they just approved it themselves. That's what she's meaning by they have override authority. The only person that has override authority in the city of Marion, or should have override authority in the city of Marion, is the auditor. It shouldn't be the service director. It shouldn't be the safety director. It shouldn't even be the mayor, him or herself. And that's because it is all segregation of duties. The mayor doesn't have statutory authority in that respect. The law director doesn't have statutory authority in that respect. It all falls on the city auditor. Not even council themselves can go in there and change that, because it takes an act of council to change budgetary appropriations. The auditor is the only one that has the specific Ohio statutory authority to change journal entries, to approve purchase orders at the ultimate level of authority. Now, you might have a safety director that could decline a purchase order that was pushed up to them from the police or fire departments. That's appropriate. If the safety director says, "Hey, I don't agree with this expenditure. This isn't aligned with our goals," or you didn't get prior approval for whatever it is, they can deny purchase orders, but in no instance should any of them have override authority.
So how and when would that be caught? So if they did override, is that something that would still come up in a timely fashion within the auditor's department?
That's a great question. And, being a little bit removed now, I'm going to have a hard time remembering. I don't recall, because I don't recall this ever happening during my tenure where somebody other than the former service director, which I knew because we were concerned because we saw journal entries being done by that person. Didn't have authority. So when we saw that, we were like, okay, we need to go check their permissions.
And that was Kathy Chapin, right?
Correct. That was Kathy Chapin. And so you can't, unless you know what you're looking for. Jay can attest to this. You're talking the way the permissions are in New World. I mean, you're talking, there could be like 100 permissions that you can give to somebody, and then to different authorities. Like, unless you're really an IT wizard there and you have the time, assuming you even know what you're doing, you got to have a lot of time to go in there and just start assigning authority to people. And I'm not aware of a report that tells you if somebody overrode their authority or whatnot. Like I said, my memory is going to be fuzzy on that. I don't remember seeing anything like that during my time, because I'm not aware of anybody having any kind of authority more than what they should have, other than the former service director, because we were very adamant about that. I would talk to Jacob about that when we found out Kathy Chapin had excessive authority. I was on the phone with New World, constantly fighting that battle. So
trying to get her removed.
Yeah, because I would go in there and remove her authority from auditor level back down to service director level, go in there the next day or two, and it would be right back to where it was.
How? And was she contacting New World herself and saying, forget about what this guy said?
No, I think it ultimately fell on the IT director or administrator, whatever his position was, Jacob. I think he had access to do the same thing or more than what I did. Because there's just a lot of questionable things that we would notice that things would change and we're like, hey, we didn't do this. And that was the biggest thing. And if
Jacob himself could alter permission.
Yeah, that's the only thing that made sense. Why would New World have incentive then we would have to be getting into a grand elaborate conspiracy if that was the case, right? Like New World's in on this, what would their motive be? I don't believe that was the case. I think what was the case is that because they even told me it took somebody with administrator access to be able to make those changes. And I was assuming that was only me because only I should have, your auditor should be the one with the highest level of authority in the financial software. Now, your IT person can have authority to do IT related things, but they shouldn't have authority to go in and manipulate the software to that degree.
It is also inappropriate for IT to be making changes without formal documentation. I just want to put that out there right now. Anytime you make an Active Directory change or a New World change in a system, there's always got to be oversight, even for the people driving the ship, guys. This is freshman level IT stuff. So this stuff that I have pulled up here it's probably not the right kind of software or the right version, but it kind of gives you an idea of what's going on here. So this is a highly sophisticated system. And if you don't know what you're doing, look, it's all over the place. And if you don't know what you're doing and you're not qualified to do it, you have absolutely no business being in here. This should be handled by the IT staff, not the auditor. I know that they're the highest fiscal officer or whatever, but that doesn't mean anything in IT. Because somebody could come in here and not understand what they're doing and give somebody override access, just like we're talking about. How did that happen? We don't know. Would they find it during a forensic audit? Absolutely. I know of at least one person for sure, and I'm waiting for the records release for what I call the magic box. I know that cracks people up, but I can't really discuss it till I have the receipts. But apparently the person that I requested the records for the magic box also had New World permissions, and that's highly inappropriate, unethical, and just absolutely ridiculous. Only people who have business need, and only at the level they absolutely need it. So we should have none of this admin access across multiple systems with override capabilities. You should only give somebody enough permissions to a software system that they absolutely have to do their job, and absolutely no more.
Well, and to your point, Jay, I think we were kind of touching on this a couple of days ago in conversation about the latest development coming out of City Council with some new cybersecurity policies. I know you're probably eager to talk about that.
Oh, I'm super happy about that.
When I was on City Council, guys, I was actually I served on the City Finance Committee. I think I was vice chair, or whatever that means, and then I was chairman of Legislative Committee, Legislation and Codes. And then I was also chairman of Information Systems Committee. When I got on council in 2018, that committee had not met for a few years. It was kind of bizarre. Like nobody talked about it. Nobody ever cared about it. And so back in 2023, I think, Jay, is when they canceled that or closed that committee. For some reason, there is no Information Systems Committee. And it really begs the question, why? Why did we do that after we had blatant known IT failures? Why is there not this council oversight? This goes back to why we need a city charter. And if not, then we need to do it under statutory form for all these people parroting that the statutory form is better. Well, by God, we better be getting some sort of council oversight over these permissions. City council is like your board of directors for a corporation, and we are dealing with a municipal corporation. They are the governing board. That's in legal terminology. Cody, you're the attorney here. That's in legal terminology across Higher Revised Code. They are the governing board. So they should have governing authority over permissions for this software. There should be, or at minimum, oversight. And it should be, you have the mayor, law director, auditor, and treasurer can maybe be on a committee or committee de facto or whatever. But what we have right now is not working, guys. And Jay, don't you find it interesting that now we're actually getting some more push from City Council on some cybersecurity initiatives?
Well, I know that there was there was a lot of pushback when we started publishing last time about this financial stuff, and our names got dragged through the mud, and the political operatives were hot and heavy, and it was out of control. But make no mistake about it, we know what we're talking about. So this is the site. I translated it into English. I couple of the counselor, one of the counselors reached out to me, Mr. Thaddeus Smith, and I kind of translated this into English. This is kind of a rough draft of what a cybersecurity plan should be. And I think it's all just highly suspicious that why would they do that like right before another term's coming in? You know what I mean? This has been brought up not just by you and Cody and the team, but it's now been brought up to me by 3 council members currently sitting. Why did this happen? Why is there no oversight? Who's driving the ship, basically? And I really don't know who's driving the ship.
When did that committee get established? Do we know? We know that
I would have to.
when it was disbanded, but you would think that they would have been meeting in 2008 and 2009 when they were doing the switch over to New World. And we know that New World had a lot of issues, especially that were acknowledged, in the first couple years. In the former supervisor of utility billing was, as I understand it, not only from the newspaper articles, but also from statements made by Twyla Lang, that he was one of the most outspoken critics of the system and how it was set up. So it'd be interesting to review the minutes from that particular committee to see what was being discussed. Have you come across any of those, Jason?
I've kind of started to browse now that I know exactly what I'm looking for, but no, I really can't speak on it until I read the whole thing. It's out of context, but I do know that this software, according to current sitting officials, was highly contested. My suspicion is because it was out of control. They've been repeatedly litigated against into the mid 2010s and into the 2020s for all kinds of crazy stuff, false arrests. It's out of control. So I don't know exactly why it was contested. I know that it has a reputation in the tech world. I have heard of it, and I've never used this particular software. So if I've heard of it just by reading, the nerd magazines, it must be pretty bad, or it was bad. I don't know if they fixed it. I know that this is not suited, from what I understand from the people who have relevant professional experience currently sitting on council. This software is not suited for Marion's government, and it's not working properly. So I would suggest, I know it's expensive and nobody wants to hear this, they got to get a different software. This is out of control, and they need a forensic audit because we don't know who did what and when. As far as I'm concerned, the books and the logs are by definition lacking controls, and they're not reliable.
Well, and why we really need to also talk about, and the reason why we still have so many unanswered questions is because the current auditor has intentionally dragged her feet. I've talked to some current officials and they verified this, that she's just not been responding for several years. It looks like this city's like unauditable or something, and it's not the case. She's just not getting information back to these auditors for the last several years. She just dragged her feet. And that's just unfortunate because we could have had this done a few years ago and had moved on by now. And there's just no reason we should be still trying to figure out, what line items have what and so on. I think Councilman Jason Schaber is probably the most vocal one out there saying that we don't know what money we have, and that's just not accurate. You can check your bank account. You can check your investment account and see what you have in cash. Now, you might not know what exactly is in each line item, but you should still even know that, at least, especially for this year. And so it just there's so much misinformation going around, and that's why this show is so important. Is yeah, we're going to give you commentary, we're going to give you our opinion and our thoughts, and you might even catch a roast or two as a stray. Sorry, but you're also going to get some facts. You're going to get some truth, and nobody else is talking about this, and that's why this show is so important.
Well, the thing is here, and this is one of the driving factors that made me, slave and freak out over these 80s and 90s audits, because as you guys know, when we were first coming back up, it was a theory immediately that this had been going on. And this is a predictable trajectory in IT, and I'm sure in finance. You start seeing, 20 years of this, common sense tells you that there's a breakdown in controls that probably goes back further. And that's a predictable trajectory in IT, absolutely. When you start seeing serious money problems, reconciliation issues, things that point to, their symptoms of the disease, and then you go back 15 years and you're still seeing symptoms of that disease, and you go back before the software a year or so and you're still seeing some of the symptoms, not quite as bad. Common sense tells you, and the profession and having experience in it tells you, that you can probably keep on going back. And that's exactly what we did. We got to the early 80s, 81, 83, and the problems have been there the whole time. It's just when the software got installed, they blew up. And I think it's a culmination of lack of experience, no financial controls, no IT controls. Basically, nobody's driving the ship. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody's tracking anything. So Jake could be making changes in this system or that system, or asking this IT guy to give him permissions to this module or whatnot. And nobody knows what's going on because there's not a central line of documentation like there should be an industry standard. This is industry standard. You go to the Philippines, they have the same thing. You go to Japan, they have the same thing. If Robert Landon wants permissions to server number 1 for XYZ, he needs to submit a ticket. Right. Jason Foreman will take that ticket and email Robert and say, okay, I'm going to check this out, make sure it's in alignment with your access matrix. That's another important thing that they're missing. The access matrix tells you what users should get default permissions per department. So then I would fix that ticket and say, okay, I fixed it, or no, you need authorization from somebody higher than you before I can give that to you. And then they either close the ticket by remedying it, giving you your permissions, and then you get an email confirmation. It's logged in the system and it stays in there forever. Or I deny the ticket and tell you what you need to do.
Well, and going back to the whole, this is a cultural thing. And Cody was asking about where are the minutes for whatever it was earlier. I can't remember, Cody. Why did we have, like, for 2 years? Was it 2 years, guys, that the clerk didn't do council
I don't
minutes?
know. I'm still digging on that. I know that there's some serious crazy, and it's just a giant Pandora's box of, I don't even know what to call it. Disorganization, intentional misconduct. I don't know what it is.
I think we need to find out from Matt, the current clerk of council, if all of the minutes have been transcribed during her tenure, because
I believe they have. I know that I did find some mumblings in some of the minutes summaries or whatever, where there was some kind of an explosion, and I clarified it. I don't know, overtime being requested or something. I'm still digging on that, but
yeah.
Once I have that information, we'll definitely discuss it on here and publication. But it's so crazy. Like Mr. Ralph Smith is probably the highest qualified person in Marion City government currently that could speak on these are foundational IT. This stuff hasn't changed since the 70s. Like, really, technology changes. Don't get me wrong.
Well, there's another guy. We haven't talked about him, and I'm not going to mention his name. But there's an assistant IT person who is like, he worked with Jacob, and he was former military. Mm-hmm. And I would sit down and have long talks with the guy. He was a nice guy. But he never could really do anything, obviously, unless it went through Jacob. And he would express this frustration all the time. There was multiple times he would come in and tell me, "Hey, I'm getting ready to walk out," and it's like, I'm like, "Hey, you need to calm down, like, right? Like, you don't, think about this." And so, this guy was former military. So, and I believe he was IT and former in the military. So, they got somebody there, and so I think it's just a matter of like their hands are tied. I don't know if he's still there, but when I was there, he worked with Jacob. Um, but it just we don't run our IT like a Fortune 500 company. We don't run it like a government. We don't run it like, we run it like a high schooler out of a garage that's just tinkering with things. I mean, there's just not like you said, these are standard global practices. And so, if you're in the IT field, like you said, if you're in Malaysia, if you're in Japan or United States, it should be all similar practices.
Yeah, it's
Um,
industry standard. So yeah,
and
Ralph, man, he kind of caught me by surprise. I know I've said this before, but it just freaked me out because he's quite a bit older than I am. I think he's my mom's age. So when I met with him for the first time face to face, I started describing some of these permission problems, and immediately he started rattling off what the problems were. And I was like, what? And then I learned that he was IT in the military with very high security clearance. Back in his day, he would have been far more qualified than I am. He's working on mainframes and government systems. You know what I mean, for the military. So he has told me, and I think he said it on the show. I'm not sure. Forgive me if you didn't, Ralph, but I'm sure he'd say it to anybody. He said that he thinks that we're just the tip of the iceberg, is what he said to me recently. When I started talking about things like the magic box, as I keep calling it, it cracks Melissa up. What are you talking about, the magic box? I can't talk about it yet because I don't have all the facts. But in the magic box is a whole lot of crazy, including permission issues and New World software access.
well, Cody's been in finance for, how many years now, Cody? You've been in it for quite a while doing
15 years.
finance. And
Yeah.
so all this stuff like that. Like, would this stuff fly in your environment where you've worked at over the years?
That's the difference between the private sector and the public sector, between a private corporation, which has accountability, because if your shit doesn't work, then you're going to run out of money and you're going to go out of business.
Mhm.
The public sector, the government, is different. There is inherently a lack of accountability. And if you throw in a lack of transparency within that, and you throw in manipulation within that, then that's a deadly mix. And that, unfortunately, is pervasive, I think, across the board within these big government systems. And because, in reality, what happens if they start doing things that result in a decrease in the treasury or their account balances, what
Right.
happens? They go to the voters and they say, "Oh, it's tough times. We're going to have to shut down Lincoln Park and all this other stuff, and the world's going to end here unless you pass this levy or you increase your income tax." And what did they do? They went from 1.5% on the income tax to 2%, and that happened, I think, a couple years after New World was installed. So, and the same thing with the auditor of state. Okay, how many people work in that office? Not many. Ohio's got what, 11.5 million people. There are 88 counties. There are, I think, 300 and some villages and cities, maybe more. I can't remember off the top of my head how many. And you have all the school districts, which are also government institutions. They're all getting audited. Every little town, village, city, school district, you name it, is getting audited by the auditor of state.
Mhm.
You really think that they have the manpower and the resources to micromanage and to really discover things? No, they only do if something breaks within a system, it becomes so glaringly apparent that it gets media attention. That's the only time you're going to really see action. Um, and that's just the way it is. But in the private sector, yeah, you don't do stuff, you go out of business. Government doesn't go out of business. They may
What's
go into financial distress. They may be overtaken and managed by the state, but they'll still exist.
Mhm.
right? So what's interesting is that you have all these crazy things going on when the law is very clear about things like penalties and fees not being, that are happening because of stuff like this, not being the taxpayer's problem and basically illegal. I believe it says that in the statutes having to do with federal and state funds, or guarding the funds of taxpayer funds, city funds. So you think they'd be a little bit more careful. And I'm just floored that, and I'm not trying to be, an ass or anything, but I am absolutely astonished that Marion, Ohio, with what's their yearly? Have we ever figured that out yet? Current yearly budget,
It's
Marion,
about 70 million.
$70 million. You got $70 million working on basically the IT aptitude of a couple of 17-year-olds that are getting ready to go to college and don't really know what they're doing yet. With no controls. Like, what is this? There's no cybersecurity policy. Now it's law, they have to do it, but a lot of places do this just because, like, they're trying to safeguard taxpayer funds, city funds. And like you said, this is something that, a charter would have been real handy, because in this day and age, sorry guys, but the tech is what keeps your money safe. So if the tech's not up to par, your money's not safe.
Right.
So this should be a concern to each and every voter or taxpayer, not just in Marion, but anywhere. Like, Marion's a small town compared to, larger cities around us.
Mhm.
And if it's happening here, where else is it happening? I do
Right.
know that we have statistical data from, of all places, the Strongest Towns website that I started digging up, of other municipalities that have serious financial problems. And I haven't got too far into that yet, but I will. Because it's the belief of myself and several other IT and national allies that we work with. I call them, they're basically advocates that are very well documented, and they're activists as well. And they work with very law enforcement agencies and things of that nature doing their own thing. But they're just astonished at this. And it's our theory that this is happening in pockets all around the country. And, the things that we're seeing in DC being uncovered in technology apparatuses like the Doge committee and stuff like that, it's all the same thing. That's exactly what they're doing. They're going into these systems and they're auditing the tech and they're figuring out what's going on. And then they're, issuing their findings. It's a mini forensic audit with super high powered computers and AI.
Well, and with all the new tech we have, I mean, why hasn't anybody in Marion City government explored the blockchain? You've got that. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit I don't know everything about the blockchain, but I've studied enough to know, and what everybody's said so far is like it's like impenetrable, so to speak. It's like
Difficult.
you can't manipulate it. Why don't we put the city's finances on the blockchain?
Well, I don't know. We were talking about that in 18. I remember.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like, this is just stuff that like you said, we've been talking about for years. Nobody's really still made any kind of suggestions for solutions. They like talking points. It's like they like, those people that get on CNN or NBC, Cody, that they just go on there and they just say the same liberal stuff like every day. Like, all kids are going hungry because Donald Trump shut the government down. Like it's like you teach a parrot to say something and then all they do is go around and say the same thing over and over again. Like that's literally what's happening here, and that's what's happened over the last 4 years since I left office. Is and I'm not going to name all of them again. Everybody knows, but these same people that they just stuck to the talking points. Robert Landon's to blame, and if you're at this point, if you're not at least acknowledging that, okay, maybe Robert Landon had some issues and some mistakes while in office, but you want to put the blame all on him and not a shared responsibility at minimum. I mean, then you're really burying your head in the sand at this point.
As we go through here, I just want to bring this up real quick. This is the first silent sabotage article. It's a beast. I have a hard time reading this all in one sitting. I know Twyla said it took her a couple of days to read. It's thorough for a reason, guys. This is important stuff. So we can track this 2001. And then you get up to 2008 and you start seeing all this crazy. And you get into 2009. That is just a massive amount here. And then you get past the software installation and boom, all of a sudden, inconsistent transactional data entries.
Right.
Weak management of cash collections. Weak controls over delinquent income tax collections. Weak controls over sanitation collections. There's that.
Right there. Well, why, if Kelly Carr, as the Democrats and the Rhino Republican on council, if they, this is what they say, she was experienced, or and her people were experienced, why would you fire them? And she won all these awards. How did she let this go unchecked? How did she let theft happen on her watch? She is responsible. The auditor's office is responsible for utility billing collection, making sure everything, any fiscal matter, whether they report directly to you or not, if it's a fiscal function in the city, the auditor has financial oversight of that matter. It's just the statutory of government that these people are parroting. How did she let this go? How did she not find this? It went on for what, guys, 2 to 3 years before it was caught.
Yeah, it went on for 3.5 years. The reason why it wasn't caught is because there were no IT controls in place, right? And that's been a theory. We talked about this last time we were in media, but it was a theory. We would not have been able to prove this because nobody would have gave us access to be able to prove it, of course. But yeah, man, this is plain as day. 2009 certification fund availabilities. There's reconciliation problems. There's the reconciliation. It's all in black and white in the state audit reports dating back to 1983, but they really exploded after this new world. And any competent IT expert is going to look at this and be like, we need to start looking at this system from the time of the install of the software. Anybody and everybody involved, any logs, any data, anything that we can get our hands on to see exactly what happened here. Mm-hmm. Because we've got multiple people telling us about password sharing, password demanding, physical access breaches, multiple people that don't have any business need to have permissions to the new worlds. This is a financial system, people. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. And, this is why we've come up with the on the money thing, where this is just not something we can talk in 1 or 2 episodes. It's going to be an ongoing discussion. And obviously we have a lot more to say. We're kind of running out of time here. Cody, what's your final thoughts? Or you want to bring us home? You want to close this out and share the final thoughts you have?
I think, again, this is a very in-depth discussion. It's something that has to be broken down. There is constant research and work that goes into it. And again, it's just presenting the evidence from the audits, from the council meeting minutes, also from period newspaper articles, and trying to piece it all together, given the current state of affairs and the reality, which is a fiscal distress analysis request by the current mayor. I think it also begs the question, why wasn't that done in 2022 or
Mhm.
2023
Yeah.
if they knew that the situation was tenuous and that the books were not reconciled and all these other things. Why didn't they do it back then? Were they worried that
That's a good point. I mean,
it might uncover something under a big old boulder that they don't want people to see? These are just questions. And I think it's important to get to the truth of the matter so that you can rectify it. And I think with the IT forensic audit, um, not only do you want to see what was done, but you also want to make sure that you don't repeat the mistakes in the future and you put the proper procedures and framework in place that things are done correctly in the future. And we're not dealing with small government budgets of the past and part-time politicians, citizen politicians. You're dealing with a large corporation's budget of taxpayer funds. So it's critically important that we figure these things out and we do things right in the future. And I also think that uh, it doesn't it doesn't give a pass or anything to future action. You have to be good stewards of the taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. So, you know, the current administration, the current government needs to make sure that yes, you went out there and you asked for this assistance from the state. So that's commendable. That's a good. Most people wouldn't want to do that just because it may draw attention and may grab headlines or be used by your adversaries to kind of point the finger at you.
I thought it was
But
an excellent move. And it's well documented that the Collins administration, I know that various members of our teams have some problems with some of their policies, but in this particular instance, I can document as soon as the Collins administration knew that software controls were disabled, not functioning, or whatever was going on, and the reconciliation module wasn't installed, they took action. You know what I mean? As soon as they found out that there is a serious need to at least look very closely at doing a, I hate to say it, very expensive forensic IT audit, he took action and asked for the advice of the auditor estate and their, special investigation unit. So he's up on it. Now, rewind a few years, 2021, it was admitted in open forum and testified before city council that this thing wasn't working right, and they didn't do anything about it. I got a lot of questions about that.
yeah, those are all valid questions, all valid points. And I think moving forward, we get through this, but we have to be cautious with spending during this time. And I think that that's something as a fiscal conservative, um, you should try to espouse to anyway. So stay tuned for more coverage on this. Again, it's an ongoing thing, not only here on the Watchmen's Report and with the work from Marion Watch, Operation Marion Watch, uh, but also with the current city leadership. So, again, hopefully we will get to the truth and put the framework in place for success moving forward. I think that's what everybody wants. So until next time, for Robert Landon, Jason Foreman, I'm Cody Higley, and this has been the Watchman's Report. And remember, a watchman is always vigilant. Have a good night.
Good night, guys.
Good night.